Hey everyone! I've seen a number of questions pop up lately around how to set up rescuing in SRPG Studio, so I figured I'd take this opportunity to try and explain how unit fusion works, in the interest of having something I can link to people when it gets asked. Firstly though, what is unit fusion? Unit fusion is the system by which you give the player the ability to temporarily merge two player units into one. This is Fire Emblem style rescuing, both in the traditional manner and in the style of Awakening's pair-up mechanic. This is also capturing a la Thracia 776, where you merge a player unit with a defeated enemy to take their weapons. You could use it for other purposes as well. APCs from Advance Wars could be made using SRPG Studio's Unit Fusion, though admittedly without scripting, the interface would look a bit different. For the sake of clarity, in this video I will refer to the two units as the carrier and the passenger, even though in the case of capturing, the passenger may not always be a willing participant. To edit your unit fusions, open the database, and on the Config 1 tab, click Fusion Settings. You can see your fusions that you've created on the left. I have 5 in this project, 2 rescues, and 3 captures. You might be wondering why I have more than one of each. We'll get to that in a bit. On the first tab, you set an icon, the name, the description, which I don't know where it appears in-game. I'm assuming this is just an internal description, as well as the text that will appear in menus for picking up the unit, setting them down, and trading the unit to another unit. Skipping ahead for a moment, the type here is your choice of normal or fusion attack. Normal is for picking up friendly units. Fusion attack will require your units to make an attack and defeat the enemy to pick them up. Filter is the kinds of units that can be fused with. Normal fusions can be your choice of player or allied units, whereas fusion attacks may only be enemies. Action after release is how you want the passenger to behave when ending the fusion. None makes them available to take an action immediately. Wait grays them out as if they've already moved that turn. And removed has them leave the battle. This last one is useful for freeing captured enemies. Lastly, allow unit trade allows passing the passenger between different carriers. Allow item trade allows the carrier to trade items with the passenger. Yes, even if the passenger is an enemy. This is how you steal weapons Thracia style. The Details tab is far more interesting. Let's go through these boxes one at a time. Stat changes during fusion sets how the carrier's stats should be changed while this fusion is active. For each stat, you set a number and then an operator. For example, speed to div means divide the carrier's speed by 2 while holding a unit with this fusion. This can be used to grant bonuses as well. If for some reason you wanted to do Awakening style pair-up, here's where the stat bonuses would go. Required capacity is the math used to determine if one unit can fuse with another. If enabled, you set a condition here, and the fusion won't be available if the condition is not met. For example, my condition is that the source, or carrier, has a build stat greater than or equal to the destination, or passenger's, own build stat plus 1. Thus, the carrier must have a larger build than the passenger. The Enable Parameter Bonus checkbox determines if you want to include things like state bonuses and penalties, class bonuses, items, and so on while doing this computation. If it is left unchecked, it will only take into account the unit's base stats. Boxes 3 and 4 are where the real magic happens. Remember when I said I'd explain why you'd want more than one rescue command? This is why. Box 3 is the source or carrier's condition. Box 4 is that of the destination or passenger. What does condition mean here? It's another case of Google translated menus. Condition is referring to conditional. Under what conditions is this fusion valid? If you've messed with SRPG Studio for any amount of time, you're probably familiar with this window. You can set different conditions for both your carrier and your passenger. If any of box 2, 3, or 4 are false, then the fusion command is not valid for that combination of carrier and passenger. Only if all 3 conditions apply will it appear. So, for example, this rescue command is for a rescuer that is a normal, mage, or armored type class. It is for a passenger that is a normal or mage type class, and it only applies if the carrier has more build than the passenger. If any of these 3 conditions are not true, this rescue command will not appear in the menu. However, with clever use of more than one fusion, we can effectively get more complex logic out of this simple system. If you note my second rescue command, the carrier gets a massive 20-point bonus to their build. This is the rescue command for mounted units. The carrier must be a horseback, flying, armored horseback, or mage horseback class for it to apply. In addition, the passenger can now also be an armored unit, unlike when the footlocked unit was doing the rescuing. In this way, you can use different math for different situations. Box 5 is stat changes in battle during fusion. This doesn't do anything for normal type fusion as far as I can tell, it only applies to fusion attacks. What it actually does, though, is inflict a stat change to the carrier when actually making the attack to start the fusion. An example, in Thracia 776, when you attempted to capture a unit, your unit during combat had half of most of their stats. This is where that would go. Box 1 is the location of the stat change while holding a unit, but Box 5 is where the stat change for the capturing attack goes. These can be different values. Box 6, Skills and Transformations, is a weird one. There's really two parts here. Include skills as a set of checkboxes. If any of these are checked, then the carrier will get all skills the passenger had of that type as long as they are riding with the carrier. Here's an example of that. I'm going to set unit skills to true, and then I'll boot up test play to show you how it works. We have two units that we care about for this. Mikhail here, if you'll note, he has Artful Dodge, a class skill, and Steal, a class skill. We're going to have him rescue Walter here, who has Charisma as a unit skill. Normally, it wouldn't matter, but in this particular case, because we turned on that setting in Box 6, now Mikhail has Charisma as a fusion skill. And this is the kind of thing you can do with the first half of Box 6. You can make this apply to item skills, to weapon skills, whatever else was on that list. And this will persist for as long as Mikhail is holding on to Walter. As soon as he sets Walter down, he will lose this skill. Admittedly, I'm not sure why you'd want to do this. You could use this in combination with the fact that skills can give access to otherwise inaccessible fusion options to make a skill that gave a sort of powered-up version of Savior, where your carrier suffered no penalties and gained the skills of their passenger, I suppose, if you wanted to. The option's there, is the point. I'm sure other people will come up with far more creative uses of it than I ever would. The transform section here allows you to set a transformation during fusion. I'll admit I haven't done anything with transforms, but how this appears to work is that it's not optional. If you set a transform here, and this fusion is in effect, the amalgam unit will be transformed by the rules of the given transformation until the passenger is released. As an example, let's set the transform in this rescue. I only have the default skeleton transform, as I haven't done anything with transforms, and I don't think I have the skeleton class anymore, but that should be fine. I checked earlier, and it's been overridden by a different class, so nothing's going to crash or anything. We've got Mikhail and Walter. This time we have a fusion set, though. So, before, Mikhail had those two class skills. Now he only has Walter's Charisma skill. If you note, he's changed from the Apprentice class here, which is a sword-wielding class, into the Fugitive class, which is a dark magic and staff-wielding class that he can't do anything in. Why Fugitive? That's just what, in my build, has the same ID that the skeleton had by default. Like I said, I got rid of the skeleton. But you could set any class here in order to have a unit transform into another unit as long as they're holding on to somebody. Again, I don't know why you'd really want to. It seems really niche, but it's certainly a thing that it's possible to do, and I expect that other people will be far more creative with coming up with a decent use for it than I will. The last thing to remember, once you have all your fusions set up, you need to enable them in the difficulties menu in the database. Fusions can be turned on or off on a per difficulty basis. If your fusion doesn't show up in-game, and you've made sure your math is right, and all your conditions are applying properly, this is probably the reason. And that's basically it. Using the magic of boxes 3 and 4, you can use lots of different fusions to really tweak how you want them to work. If you have any questions and didn't somehow already come from the SRPG Studio University Discord channel, I'll put the link to that channel in the description. It's where I and many people more knowledgeable than myself hang out, and we're usually willing to answer most questions, so drop by if you run into any issues. Combining units is one of the coolest mechanics in these sorts of games, from Fire Emblem's Rescue to the unit carry stacks in the Disgaea games, and I think that this is one of the things that SRPG Studio does relatively well. Go and do interesting things with it.